Actually, if you look at the report, we make it very clear there is no way to have ACFTA functional if you don't have mobility of capital. And capital here, mobility of labor, money, and all these other things. So for countries who still, you know, sometimes I make a joke, which I mean is not a joke. Oftentimes you hear us talk about colonialism, and we bemoan colonialism, but we also go back and celebrate colonialism. Because those countries were drawn in a room in Berlin, none of us were there. None of us were there. But still, we continue to use that, the same people who did that drawing, in terms of this one is Nigeria, this one is Niger, this one is, and this one is, they united because they see the power in diversity, unity in diversity, and so on. That was Europe. Now in Europe, you can go anywhere, trade anywhere, and so on. Of course, we have Brexit because of populism and other things, but they have an European market because they understand the value in economies of scale. So I'll just re-echo your voice, and the report did make that very clear, that mobility of labor is a very fundamental aspect that we need to focus on. The African diaspora, actually very critical. Like when I say the best of Africa is outside. Human capital, finance, everything is outside. And we all look outside to our colonial masters to come and help us. We have been looking, they are not helping. They don't have the capacity to, because the system is not designed to help us. The system is designed to grow their own economies. And that's how every responsible leader should be, growing your own economies. So it is, we in African Development Bank with the African Union and the other agencies, ACFT and so on, we started a program on leveraging the African diaspora for Africa's development. And we've identified 5 key areas we are working on, creating instruments to make that happen. One is on securitizing remittances, because at the moment, remittances mostly go to consumption smoothing, and some of them soft investments that happen to build a house or something like that. But we need to create a system where that can be securitized so it actually becomes an investable fund. And from the consultations we've done, if that happens and we have that instrument, the diasporans can actually be the donors. Because currently, diaspora remittances is the most resilient, sustainable, and the largest capital inflow into the continent. It's now about how to channel it to production and so on. So that's part of it. And then countries are already experimenting and working on diaspora bonds. My executive director here from Nigeria, they did issue a diaspora bond in Nigeria. That experience has really worked very well. And so on and so forth. So that's another instrument that we're trying to create templates so that it can be scaled out across the continent. But there is also one thing that the diasporans bring, which has always been not looked at, which I call the go-between advantage. They understand the Africa, and they understand the countries of where they are. And that includes understanding the market, and information is a key to business success. There are so many people in Africa, Indians, that lived in Uganda before the issues they had, yeah? And some of them, I have a friend, an Indian friend, he's a billionaire. You know his job? He calls it hand-holding. Identifying Indian businesses to invest in the Eastern Africa region. Because he understands the place, he has made relationships and so on, and it opens doors, it de-risks investments and so on. So African diasporans can also do that, and I call that trade facilitation. That's another function that African diasporans can do. Being a diasporan myself, I bemoan the fact that quite often we blame governments, we blame the circumstances in Africa, and we're not finding solutions for those circumstances. Use the opportunity of who you are, the experiences you've got, leverage that for wealth creation for yourself and for your countries. That can happen, and that's something we are working on. And then there's brain circulation in terms of we have a number of Africans are leading innovation in the global community. Go to Pfizer, go to NASA, go many places. You have brilliant Africans leading things in universities and so on. We now have technologies where you can sit where you are. I'm not asking you to go home. Sit where you are and deliver that your knowledge to your countries on governance, on technology, on economics, on anything. You can be here and deliver lectures to your home universities and so on. Let's do that, because that's beneficial, because we are leveraging the infrastructure and the systems they have here in order to deliver for your country. So that can happen, and we need to deal with that. On natural resources, yes, that's a full chapter on this, because Africa can really not develop on the current terms on how we use natural resources. So I encourage you to read that. And under the leadership of the African Union, we have also developed the African Mining Green Minerals Strategy, which is a follow-up to the African Mining Strategy. So that's a clear strategy for making that happen, and that can move. Moving from words to action is the next step. You have the vision. You now have the strategic actions that needs to be taken. And what we're now doing is willing countries that come to us, the African Development Bank, AU, and AUDA and NEPAD, because we have this at country levels, the models on what needs to be done at country levels. So countries that are willing, you have the political will to do that, we can then go in and help work with them in order to actually action a number of these. And like I've said, there's a number of policies and strategies already in place by African Union, African Development Bank, and different African institutions that we can just take off the shelf. On globalization, that actually is the way forward, because multilateralism has never delivered for Africa, and my hypothesis is will never deliver for Africa. So we need to focus on what I call plurilateralism, which is find partners with whom you can trade and trade. Find partners with whom you can exchange technologies and exchange technologies. So we don't have to cry about trade tariffs put in by one country. Diversify. Look for other partners. The world is so large. And for example, Lesotho has challenges because of their AGOA and the facilitation of their textile industry. But how much of textile is Lesotho producing that will service the whole African market? Why can't we repurpose that industry to provide for Africa instead of spending a lot of time on how to trade with other countries? So the point for me is that we have what it takes to develop with pride. We have what it takes to develop as who we are. The wisdom that we got from our Vice President here, we really need to begin to think of developing with pride, doing things as Africans that we are, and then finding partners that meet us at the same level. So not partners that give us conditions, but partners with whom we agree on conditions for partnership. And I think that's the wisdom we got from His Excellency when he spoke. On domestic debt, again, the problem of Africa is not about mobilizing resources. We are losing what we mobilize. So it's about state capacity to be able to reprioritize where we source for financing for development. Because if we keep the 1.6 billion every day in Africa, that's about 570-something billion. That's more than the infrastructure gap we have. That's more than what we need for poverty reduction. That's more than what we need for a lot of the things for which we borrow for. But we still borrow and lose almost 40% of it because of inefficiencies in the system. So it is just for us as Africans to realize we can do it. We have what it takes to do it. It's just for us to think home, be proud to be Africans. And then we partner because we also want to make influence globally. What Africa does with the green minerals defines the shape of green transitions in Africa, in the world. What Africa does with its 65% of arable land that remains in the world defines the shape of food in the world. So we have a lot to negotiate with. But to do that, we need to change our mindset from the asking to partnership so that we sit at table with others. And like my brother there will always say, let's create our own narratives and pursue it instead of follow narratives that were created for us. Thank you.